Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to all of you who have joined us today as we chat with Worley Parsons on elevating road safety to a corporate and community priority. Now, our webinar presenter today is joining us all the way from London, where I'm sure you can appreciate it's very, very, very early in the morning. So a warm welcome to Paul, and thank you for your time in joining us at this very late hour for yourself. Now, this webinar is a part of the National Road Safety Partnership Program, or NRSPP, webinar series. And for those of you unaware, the NRSPP has been established to provide a collaborative network for Australian business and organisations to help them create a positive road safety culture both internally and externally. It aims to help organisations of all sizes across all sectors to share and build road safety initiatives specific to their own workplace and beyond. It's delivered by ARB and funded primarily by a government coalition as well as ARB. For more information and tools like this webinar, please refer to the NRSPP website. Now, as I mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, our webinar presenter today, representing Worley Parsons, is Paul Cook. Now, Paul is based in London, as I mentioned, and has over 25 years' experience in HSE, gained in industry sectors including oil and gas, mining, services, and FMCG. Paul has been with Worley Parsons for over 8 years, having held roles at a local, regional, as well as a global level, prior to taking up his current role in 2012. Now, welcome, Paul, and before I hand over to you, I'll just run through a few housekeeping items for those who haven't participated in our webinars before. Now, we'll be aiming for about 30 minutes presentation time, and we will be recording the webinar today, ladies and gentlemen, so there's no need to take notes frantically. All of the presentation material as well as the recording will be sent to you once the webinar has concluded. My name is Angela Juhas, and I'll be your webinar moderator today. So if you do experience any issues, ladies and gentlemen, please do get those through to me and I will surely assist. Now, I draw your attention to your control panel where you will see a questions box, and we ask that if you have questions for Paul along the way, please don't be shy. Type them into that box and I'll address them all at the end of the presentation. Now, without further ado, I warmly welcome Paul Cook, joining us from London. Paul, how are you going today?
I'm doing well, thank you, Angela, and thanks very much for that introduction, and thanks so much for everyone who's joined today and giving me the opportunity to hear the Worley Parsons story on road safety as it is so far, bearing in mind that we certainly understand we're only pretty much at the start of our journey, but have made some good advances in the early running. Maybe just to set the scene, though, a little bit about Worley Parsons for those of you who don't know Worley Parsons. I know I certainly didn't when I joined 8 years ago. But Worley Parsons is a top 100 AXS listed company by market capitalisation, and we work primarily within the energy resources sector, so that's oil and gas, mining, power generation, infrastructure, etc. And we're active across a lot of different phases of project development for many customers. So we are active in the engineering area, and of course, as you can see there, procurement, construction management, and also our consulting and advisory services. We're geographically diverse, operating in 43 different countries across the world. Currently, we have around 35,000 employees, but I will say that we have many, many thousand more contractors who are very important in executing the work that we do. We have about 1,000 vehicles, or in excess of 1,000 vehicles, that are either owned or leased by Worley Parsons. But that would, I believe, understate the number of vehicles that we use and have access to markedly. We often use customer vehicles and, of course, hire vehicles, taxis, etc. So we are highly exposed to road transport safety and all that comes with it. But really, today's webinar, what I really wanted to do was to share with you, as I said, our journey and invite questions at the end of the webinar about areas that may interest you. But I guess to set the scene initially, since certainly and before, but since I joined Worley Parsons 8 years ago, we've worked really quite hard on health, safety and environment. And our focus has been not solely, but largely focused on project establishment, construction activities, field activities that maybe geoservices and other people like that do. We've been focused on how to share our values and get the same kind of HSE performance from our contractors that we expected ourselves. And almost surprisingly, it really hasn't been until the last couple of years that we've realised that we needed to dedicate a program or an initiative specifically based on road safety, which over the last few years, as we've spread across the world, has actually become our #1 safety risk. So some of the ways that we've done that is what I'll be speaking to today. But certainly one of the underpinning methodologies is the UN Decade of Action, and we are signatories, and we've adopted the 5-pillar approach, which seems to sit very well with our organisation. And really what the webinar is about is for me to try and explain the approach we've taken in framing our program around the 5 pillars, and also the interesting blend we've had of trying to overlay a global program that is still relevant in local communities and workplaces. And I guess our story starts in a pretty sobering fashion, and it was in the period of 2011 and 12 that we realised and saw tragically personnel killed in 5 different countries around the world, and whilst some of these were not technically work related, for the safety professionals in the audience today who may think in terms of statistics, these may have fallen slightly outside of our statistical boundaries, really made no difference, because this was a tragic loss of human life of Worley Parsons people, and that was simply unacceptable to our people and our company. So our program started in earnest when the CEO signed the UN Compact in April 2011. And it's not my role tonight to explain in any great depth what the 5 pillars are. You can see them there, I hope, on your screen. But what I will be doing is talking about how Worley Parsons has been active and within each of the pillars, and what we've done. And just to re-emphasise what a good framework it has been for us to work from, not just in terms of what we've achieved internally, but also in communication with our stakeholders, such as our customer partners, industry associations, etc. Okay, so to get into the meat of it, let's have a look at what we've been doing in terms of implementing activities around each of the 5 pillars. So the first pillar, of course, is road safety management, and this is really where we had to set out our stall and understand really what it was we expected from our operations globally, not just Australia, but of course wherever we operate around the world. And there were 2 key documents. There were a lot of other materials, guidelines and flyers and booklets and all sorts of things to promote road safety have been developed. But 2 key documents were the business travel policy. Being the type of organisation we are, we do have people travelling all around the place on a daily basis, and we realised that apart from what was happening within the normal locations that people work, we certainly didn't have the controls we desired when people travelled. So we stipulated what we expected from hire cars, behaviours and expectations around taxis, and very keen in countries where there is high risk amongst public transport, to ensure that our locations are vetted taxi or hire car providers so that we get the drivers that we want in the vehicles that are acceptable to us. And we also made it clear that our personnel who travel for business were empowered to take the safety measures that they needed to take, and that may mean that they do not need to take the cheapest hire car available. In fact, we actively discourage that and apply the NCAP ratings to hire cars as well now. But it's okay to send taxis away. If you're uncertain, ring the local management group and find out what is the best way of travelling before you leave. So a big emphasis was placed on business travel, but far and away the biggest thing we did was we set out our objectives in the vehicle and driving standards. So this was culturally a big change for us, because it's one thing to have expectations, but when you write them down and mandate them, working in a global organisation, there can be repercussions. It's not easy, and yet we proceeded. So the kinds of things that were stipulated in our driving and our vehicle and driving standard were the type of vehicles. So we've mandated NCAP 5-star rating vehicles for passenger vehicles and light commercial vehicles. Our journey management processes were ingrained into the way we do business. And I'll speak a little bit about that later, but the locations in which we operate around the world were allowed to do it differently, but via risk assessment we determined which journeys would need to be monitored and measured from start to finish, and which local journeys could fall under a blanket arrangement. So that was made clear. Our driver competency was absolutely key. And also we established a set of 9 key safe behaviours, which I will talk to shortly. Pillar 2, our was really where we saw our ability and responsibility to put back something into the communities in which we operate. And we saw ourselves as relatively uniquely positioned in terms of the engineering and technological capability we have and expertise to assist with developing safer roads. And there were some very simple examples. We were able to influence the design of pedestrian vehicle barriers on city roads in places like Sofia in Bulgaria. There were other examples that where we were involved in pedestrian safety efforts in Australia, and but far and away our best example is the work we did with the IRAP organisation, which I will come to towards the end of tonight's presentation. In terms of Pillar 3, I've already mentioned the fact that we've opted for 5-star NCAP rated vehicles, which sounds sensible and eminently achievable in Australia, but you do, and we did, hit some hurdles in countries where vehicles like that were either very expensive or unavailable, or simply the concept of NCAP 5-star wasn't, just wasn't understood or recognised. I feel that we've largely got over those hurdles for the vehicles within our fleet. Some of the exceptions or adaptations we need to make was where the NCAP program wasn't available in a certain country, then we would use another country's NCAP rating as long as we could establish it was in fact the same model and make of vehicle that was under consideration. So we did have to make some adjustments along the way to make sure that people could do the work they needed to do. Another big one in terms of safer vehicles was in-vehicle monitoring systems. And again, we had to be quite clear about what those systems were capable of doing, and without being quite specific, we found that we were getting quite a large variation in what people were installing. So again, in some countries, we asked them to install in-vehicle monitoring systems. What they did was install trackers, which was really only one of many driving behaviour parameters we wanted to measure. So The specification was very important. We did go down a path of attempting sole source provider. For us, it wasn't achievable. So, as I mentioned, we stuck to the specification and allowed each location to purchase whatever device they needed, as long as it could do the job that we asked it to do. I think in terms of safer road users, this has probably been the gem in our program today, and we've got the most value out of developing what we've termed as the 9 key safe behaviours. And yeah, I believe these have been quite pivotal in our success so far. I guess what we recognise is we're such a diverse organisation, it's not possible to make rules for every condition or circumstance that a driver may find themselves in. We operate in snow in Canada, and we operate in sand in Saudi Arabia. We operate on major freeways. We also operate in places where there are no roads at all. So we realised that there was something more than a regulation or a procedure. We needed something that got more to people's hearts and minds. So we developed these 9 key safe behaviours. And for many of you looking at the slide at the moment, you'll probably recognise them and say, yep, they all look pretty standard, and lots of organisations have them. And indeed, lots of organisations do have them. But I guess the trick has been getting these adopted globally. And there's some of the challenges that we've had, which I'll talk to in a further slide in this pack. But just for now, I guess some of the things that jumped out at me as we tried to implement these were avoiding unnecessary travel. I mean, for those of us who travel a lot, that sounds like a luxury, not a key safe behaviour. But we are, like most companies, we're very focused on our customers. We like face time with them. We like face time with our contractors and all of our business partners, really. But we had to sort of get our operations and our company to take a step back and say, hey, look, does this really need to be face to face? Do you really need to drive 300 kilometres to have an hour meeting only to drive 300 kilometres back that same evening? Is there a way we can manage this better? But more importantly, do we really need to travel? And whilst we don't have statistics on this at this stage, my intuition is we do have people using a lot more electronic means of communicating. Doesn't have to just be the phone, but video conferences have taken root in our organisation now and seem to be providing a good alternative in some circumstances to road travel. Not going through all of them, as I said, but some of the surprises we got was around seatbelts. You would think, being from Australia, that seatbelts now are fairly routine and vehicles have them and people use them. Certainly not the case in all of the places that we operate. And I did say I wouldn't pick out any particular countries this evening, but I will say that it is not uniform, and that's where we had the tension of local culture versus what company expectations were, and I'll talk a little bit about how we've made some inroads into making those changes. And I guess another one that's important for us is a lot of the time we're not just drivers, we're passengers. And what we've done in our organisation is empower our people to implement all of these 9 key safe behaviours. And that means as a passenger, you don't suddenly become mute and without an opinion or any rights once you get in a vehicle. And we actively encourage our people, when they are travelling as passengers, to talk to the driver about what their expectations are. Don't get in vehicles that look unsafe, and take ownership for their own safety when they're not the person behind the wheel. And in terms of the fourth pillar, I think I also talked about our training. In terms of our training, we are currently focused on our business travellers, although our online training is available to our anyone who does it for the company gets a free license for a member of the family, which is, I think, great. But we do have training in, I guess, in two main guises. One is an online offering, so all business, anyone who travels for business or drives, I should say, for business, is required to do our online training program. It is an off-the-shelf product called Alert Driving. There are others. We've found Alert to be good in the time we've been using it. It is what the modern experience of online training is these days. It's interactive. It has lots of video, and it also has local content, which is important to us. So if you're in Lagos, Nigeria, and you're doing your hazard perception training for online, on your online hazard perception training for driving, you see a Nigerian road. You don't see an Australian road or an American road, and we're able to get that in all the countries we operate, and that for us has been a very good thing. In terms of the content, there's really three parts to it. So it has a first part which introduces our people to the requirements of our standard. They then do the hazard perception training, and the results of that automatically generates further modules on specific road risks that the driver really needs to focus on. And the final pillar, of course, is pillar 5, post-crash response. And really, because we do work in some high-risk environments and have done for many years, we're actually relatively good at responding to crises. We have a group of people around the world highly trained who lead us in our crisis and incident response. But of course, what they don't have is a crystal ball. And we've found the absolute key for us in terms of road safety is to know where people are. And certainly in-vehicle monitoring systems go a long way to that, where they're wired into live vehicle tracking, and we have that in a number of locations around the world. But the whole journey management process has been key for us, and by risk assessment, I mean we don't have journey management protocol for every single trip, but it's not an arbitrary decision either. And we do a macro level risk assessment, if you like, and from that we understand in a location by location, project by project scenario, which journeys really do need to be the subject of journey management planning and which ones are just considered local run-around journeys. And this has enabled us to know for higher risk journeys where our people are. So this again is an example of where we set a standard, but we let each location work out the intricacies for themselves, and they've managed to do it in a number of different ways. So in some parts of the world they're using a paper-based system. They may have a journey management coordinator or several who are dedicated to do nothing but make sure people get from A to B in a safe fashion. But then there are other parts of the world where it's an intranet service, and yet other parts of the world where there is a journey management planning provider or vendor, where it's primarily done by telephone, as Bryce said, an external provider. We have examples of that in some of our major projects in Canada, for example. So where have we got to so far? We recognise we've still got a long way to go, and we'd be foolish if we thought otherwise. But what we have seen since we started our program is a 36% reduction in motor vehicle crash rate, which is good. And importantly, we've also seen significantly fewer high potential road crashes. So we're seeing both a reduction in the overall number of crashes, but we're also seeing a reduction in the potential severity of those crashes. And one of our challenges for the future also lies in these statistics, because if I were to show you a breakdown of Worley Parsons employees versus our contractors versus our joint venture partners, we're seeing that we've had, perhaps predictably, by far a greater impact on our own employees. So we've seen a quite impressive rate of decline of road transport crashes amongst our people, but we have not transferred that same success yet to our contractors, and that's part of our focus for future programs. And we're already throwing around ideas about how to get clearer specifications into our tender documents, for example, and how to open up better dialogue with our contractors. And in many respects, we take our lead from one of our major customers, Shell, who are particularly good at this, and you know, they've been terrific in helping us develop our program. And one of the things I think it's well worth anyone on this call who is looking at implementing their program is do things like you're doing today and listen to webinars, go and talk to your industry peers, for example, and see what they're doing, because really I was with Shell just last week in London, and you know, again, thank them for you know, they're pushing the boundaries out there, and we're gratefully following in their footsteps. It's a huge advantage to partner with a company who are significantly more advanced in road safety than we are right now. Final thing I'll say about performance before I move on is we're also now seeing a significant increase in the number of off-the-job incidents being reported. We do encourage that. It teaches us an awful lot about the road conditions and the types of hazards that our people are facing locally. So we feel at the moment, by seeing more reporting of off-the-job incidents as a positive affirmation that our program is gaining traction and people are listening. It also fits well with our future programs, which will be based more around a 24/7 approach to road transport safety. We knew at the outset of this program we had to start somewhere, and we chose to focus on our people who drive for work or travel for work. But we recognise that it's a big picture than that. We need to look at you know, family and community, and we believe made some good steps down that track. You know, it hasn't all been plain sailing, that's for sure. And I guess some of the, you know, I could probably talk to you for 3 hours about the challenges we've had, but I won't do that to you. So I'll keep it to a higher level, and I've just sort of contemplated what have been our biggest challenges, and without doubt the communications protocol has been the most important. You know, we thought we were clever, and you know, and it was important to have our systems and procedures and standards that most organisations have. But quite frankly, the 9 key safe behaviours have been eminently more effective than all of those many pages. And the reason that is because they do transcend language, and they do transcend culture. They're easy to get a communication about one of them or all of them out, and they were really pivotal in getting our executive buy-in. It was something that they could adopt quickly and easily and participate in. So, you know, we've made videos explaining our key safe behaviours that have used our executive management. Equally, we've made videos using local people, so and people who have had personal experiences. So we've had people from Kazakhstan, where you saw earlier we had a tragic bus fatality. People in Trinidad who have had similar experiences. People who have had positive experiences from Canada and Australia and Indonesia. So we're able to pull together and include all of the different cultures and geographical areas we work in into the program, which has added a little bit to its success. I mentioned at the start, though, we do have this tension between company culture and expectations versus local, and this is where we've found that whilst it's great to have executive CEO involvement, preaching the message, those kind of people are still very remote from day-to-day activities in a far-flung country, and that's where the local leadership are absolutely pivotal, that they engage and they drive home the message to their local people. The education process has been really important. It seems odd, but in some countries and cultures, the wearing of the seatbelt is just a foreign concept, and you really do need to take it from first principles and explain to people that wearing a seatbelt may be the difference between life and death. And sadly, we've had examples in various parts of the world where we've had crew buses crash, and quite literally those with seatbelts have lived and those who haven't worn them have died. And explaining the what's in it for me has been absolutely key in local areas. And I think also really importantly, we've had to have consequences, and that sounds a bit ominous. They're not always bad. In fact, usually they're good. And again, in Kazakhstan, we have a really, I think it's an impressive program of driver reward program, where based on the in-vehicle monitoring statistics, the best drivers are rewarded. It's a small reward, but it's every month, and it maintains maintenance in our program, which is probably the final challenge that I wanted to mention today is maintaining that momentum in your program. I've already mentioned Shell, who I think do a fantastic job of their road safety program. They're more than 12 years into their program, and they're still developing it. They're still looking for the next horizon, and that's what we need to do. And Worley Parsons is probably known for its entrepreneurial and innovative culture, which means people get bored with stuff really quite quickly. So, we can't have the same road transport safety program next year as we had this year. Yes, we can't forget the principles, but we have to keep moving and keep refreshing, and it's just incredibly important for us, and I'm sure it is for the organisations that other people are on this webinar. In terms of, I did say I wanted to come back to a good news story to sort of finish the talking part of this and allow it to open up to any questions there may be. But as I said, we've been largely focused on our business travellers and our people who drive for work as a day-to-day activity. But we haven't forgotten it's a bigger picture, and we do have a community focus. And this particular effort is one that I think is sits well with the sponsors of this webinar and generally what Worley Parsons is about in terms of the broader community. But in partnership with IRAP, we were able to take a look at their well-respected, tested and internationally recognised road assessment process and make some augmentations to that. So what we were able to do was transfer that concept onto low-cost tablets, and by using some technology of GPS and cameras, we were able to get a tool which was pretty simple to use on an iPad or similar, be used out in situ on the roads, and it basically meant that assessments could be done a lot more effectively and a lot quicker. So we beta tested the devices and thought they worked pretty well. Then we went to a pilot last year in South Africa. So as sponsors of the Road Safety Fund Safer Schools program, we thought we would take our the IRAP tool that we'd helped augment to South Africa, and we were able to successfully pilot the device around some schools in Cape Town. And this gives us great hope because obviously in South Africa, for those of you who've been there, the roads are not at all the safest places that you'll find, but there's a lot of them that need help, and obviously no government can afford to fix all roads at once. So this tool helps, I think, enormously in allowing local governments to profile their roads and make sure that they spend wisely when they're looking at their road transport safety budgets. So it's still early days, but for me it was a great initiative that I think we can be proud of, and something that looked beyond just our company employees, but the community in general. So that's a pretty quick run through the Worley Parsons program as it currently stands, and as I've said a couple of times now, we appreciate we're only towards the start of the journey, not the end, but we feel we've made a positive start, and we're more than happy to share.
Sorry, Paul, you've dropped out there for a second, but I will take this opportunity to have joined us today, and encourage you to send any questions through if you have any for Paul, and we'll get those through to him. And I did want to mention at this point as well that our webinar today, as well as many others, has been sponsored by Safe Work Australia, and we thank them for their ongoing involvement and support of the NRSPP and our webinar program. So a big thank you to them. Now, we have had a couple of questions, and Paul, before I get to those, I'd just like to firstly thank you for sharing your story with us. Instigating change and managing that change in any organisation is a mammoth effort, and I know that, you know, with anything I've tried to do, it's very difficult to get people on board, even if the benefits are, you know, quite obvious. And we have had a lot of questions relating to the challenges that you've faced and how you've overcome those. So could you tell us a little bit more about some of the biggest challenges and how you've overcome those?
Sure. Well, I guess one of the things is we need to be honest with ourselves. Everyone has seen what's happening with the oil price. Since the global financial crisis, money has been a paramount issue. So it would be foolhardy to pretend that even with such a critical program as road safety is, that there's infinite funds available to deal with it. And one of the absolute critical parts of our program has been to demonstrate the value that our land transport safety program can bring. And we had to be reasonably sophisticated in the way we did that, and it was probably something as HSE practitioners we didn't necessarily anticipate. So along with the obvious preservation of human life, which is infinitely important, we were able to show environmental benefit, running costs of vehicle benefit, and really having a rock solid basis for the program to begin with was a big challenge to get that accepted, because we knew it was going to be a multi-million dollar program and would be over several years. So we certainly found that a challenge, because without that you can't even get out of the gate. Let's be honest. Probably the biggest challenge we've got right now is influencing our contractors. As I mentioned, the Worley Parsons people, they work for you. They're obliged to follow your processes, although it's not a big stick activity. It's more an encouragement and education communication program. But getting those people who are one step removed from us, our contractors, on board still is our biggest challenge, and we're having some success. But again, I think I've mentioned them a couple of times tonight. Shell, by taking a leaf out of Shell's book, I mean they constantly have the door open, and I'm in contact with their road safety specialist. Yeah.
Sorry, I missed the end of that. I hope our audience did hear it though. We had a little dropout there. Okay. I'll move to another question though. This is an interesting one. There are some countries where finding good drivers with the HSC training experience mentality is difficult. Some projects and companies do not allow expat driving outside the project site, or even at the site. How do you manage and balance this condition or challenge?
Yeah, we face exactly that, and basically we have a relatively sophisticated risk management process that helps us decide that. To be honest, we have we make that decision most often, not exclusively, but most often on security basis. And it's not so much that the drivers are incompetent to drive on roads, it's more the consequence of an accident, and whether they'll be misappropriated by people who appear to be police officers, and there could be dire consequences of being a novice in country. So we make that decision very early in our mobilisation process around, yes, this is a place expats can drive, or no, it can't. But it's not a blanket ban by any means. So if you're going to countries like Australia, US, UK, you can certainly drive as an expat. but Nigeria, Kazakhstan, not so much. So to answer the question, we base it on an assessment of risk at the project or location development onset.
Great. And another question here from Peter. Thank you, Peter, for getting that through. So the question is, whilst the program is still evolving, in driving home the program and key safe behaviours, has Worley Parsons addressed matters of non-compliance with staff and contractors?
Yeah, we have. And to be honest, we've allowed that to evolve slightly differently in different jurisdictions, but most locations now are moving towards a just culture model. So it's a similar method that is used for other HSE non-discretions. It's kind of based on James Reason's culpability model, whereby it's quite simply, did the individual, how severe was the transgression, and could how much could the individual have done to prevent it? So we don't have a three strikes and you're out approach whatsoever. It's more, as I mentioned, just culture and how culpable was the individual, how much were they able to influence the behaviour or the outcome that occurred.
Great, thank you for that question. And David has a question as well, and David's asking, do you play an advocacy role for road safety with governments or civil society organisations?
Not really. I mean, we are involved through our corporate social responsibility program, which is itself quite new, with a few selected NGOs. And we have a process by which those are vetted and approved. There's only 3 or 4 themes that we currently have on the go in CSR, and road safety is number 1 actually. So we're active in some areas, but I wouldn't say overly so.
All right, and a couple of great little comments have come through here. Jerome saying, what a fantastic initiative. Worley Parsons should be very proud. A great example of a corporate citizen. So thank you for that comment. And another comment here from Edward, who said, more of a comment, I like the idea of organisations utilising teleconferencing and video conferencing over long distance travel to save on travel, which I agree is a brilliant initiative. And we have a question here that sort of relates to earlier on in the webinar when you were talking about the ANCAP safety standards and so forth. So the question reads, you mentioned hire cars. What was the ANCAP safety standard Worley Parsons expected, and did this actually occur in the field?
Yeah, it's we initially started with a 4-star rating. Which is a pretty good standard of vehicle, and prevents a lot of significant injuries. But we have moved it to 5-star as we found that vehicles were becoming, the 5-star vehicles were becoming more and more available. So what we did see in the early days was a real a lack of utility vehicles that were available in 5-star NCAP rating, and that has largely resolved. There's a lot more of those vehicles now. So we've moved to 5-star NCAP rating, and that's what we expect to see in the field, and that's enshrined in our business travel policy.
Excellent. Well, we might take one more question before we finish up our webinar for today. And of course, Paul's details are there on the screen in front of you, and they'll be sent out in email also. So if questions do come to mind once the webinar has concluded, I'm sure Paul would be happy to hear from you and address those after the webinar. One more question here. So this one's from Justin, and it reads, you mentioned using telematics to reward drivers. What behaviours are you looking for which you recognise?
Yeah, really it's consistency across the week. I think it is. We're measuring in Kazakhstan, for example, other locations use different time periods, but it's a combination of not speeding, staying within geofencing areas where they're provided. Harsh braking is measured, harsh acceleration is measured, and these parameters, I should add, this is where it gets a little technical and almost beyond me, but we do set those parameters slightly differently based on locations, because those of you who have driven in Bangkok, for example, know that if you're not standing on your brakes pretty regularly, you're just going to go into the back of the car in front. So parameters are set, I guess, what would you say? Yeah, the parameters are set locally, but the actual style of driving we expect is global. So we will always measure harsh braking, harsh accelerating, speeding, over revving of the engine, and staying within geofencing where it's appropriate. So
Right.
so they're the things that we look to reward. And as I said, the rewards are small, and often I should also say these all roll up into a monthly score. So it's usually out of 100, and people who get between 98 and 100 may get something, and it might be something as small as a certificate. Sometimes it's of no monetary value. It's just they get their picture in the local newsletter, shaking hands with the local director, and that's reward enough in many locations.
Absolutely. I think, just that acknowledgement is definitely reward enough. It doesn't have to be about, an expensive gift or prize or anything like that. But, just acknowledgement of that good behaviour. All right, Paul, I thank you so very much for staying up late, or rather into the early hours of the morning over there in London time to deliver this webinar for us and to share the Worley Parsons experience with our audience here today. And just on that, once again, our sponsor today for today's webinar, as well as the other NRSPP webinars, is Safe Work Australia, and we thank them again also for their working alongside us. If anyone does have any questions that we have run out of time to address today, please feel free to get in touch with us after the webinar, and I'm sure Paul would be more than happy to chat with you thereafter. Thank you again, Paul, and thank you everyone for your time today. Hope you can join us for future webinars. Have a nice day.